So first, I just want to say thank you to everyone that took the time to watch my first video, to all the people who reached out over the past couple of months, and all the people that were there for me while I was going through a really difficult time. It certainly meant a lot to receive lots of messages and phone calls and wishes from people in our life. It was definitely a really rough 4 months. I can't believe that it's been 4 months. But yeah, I just wanted to give an update and talk about a couple of things related to the treatment. I've gotten a bunch of questions, and over the past 4 months, have had so many people reach out to me, not just to tell me that they hope that I'm doing well or getting better, but to ask questions about tick stuff, which comes as no surprise because a lot of people have been dealing with tick stuff. So yeah, it's been over 16 weeks, I think, since my last video. Oh, there's a snake. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so last week was my first full week off of IV antibiotics, which was huge. In total, I think it was 16 weeks of IV antibiotics. So that was like my first week and a half before I got the blood clots, the issues with doxy, went to the ER, got COVID, had to take a break, and then restarted. And so once I restarted, I did 12 full weeks. So that's Monday through Friday, every day. And then I did 2 weeks of a taper. So that just meant for 2 weeks, I only went in 3 days. And now I'm totally off of IV antibiotics, and then I'm still on oral medication. So really, like, the 14 weeks was the bulk of my treatment. And I'd say that it was like 6 weeks before I started to notice a difference and like really start feeling a little bit better week by week. The first 6 weeks didn't really notice much changing. I was pretty frustrated and had a lot of like questionings, like, is this actually working? Is this worth it? And then I had a really rough patch during that 6th week. My Babesia symptoms flared a ton, and I felt like I couldn't breathe all week, and I freaked out and reached out to my provider and told her, like, I'm really struggling. Whatever we're doing for the Babesia just isn't working, which at the time I was on a medication called Aricoda, which is an oral medication. And so we stopped the Aricoda and I started a new Babesia protocol, which was a combination of a medication called Coartem and azithromycin. And both of those were oral. So that was not part of my IV treatment. But switching to the Coartem, it's a pretty strong medication, and you only take it once every 2 weeks for 3 days. So twice a day for 3 days, every other week. And you have to hold all other medications while you do that. But I noticed a difference within 48 hours. I started feeling better. My main Babesia symptom, which is air hunger, went down dramatically. So yeah, this weekend is I think, my 5th or 6th round of the Coartem, and I feel a ton better. My air hunger is like almost non-existent, and it has been that way for a few weeks, which is such a relief. I almost forgot what it was like to breathe normally. After switching the Babesia medications, I started to notice my Babesia symptoms going down, which seems like helped everything else get a little bit better and maybe made the other medications a little bit more effective because I started to improve week over week. So Monday through Friday, I drive to Del Mar to the Stram Center, which is where I was being treated, and I would get my IVs. And then over the weekend, you get a break, and I would always feel better on the weekends, which is really nice. And Some people don't, which is pretty rough. So I would always feel a little bit better and then slump, having to go back. I think part of my little slumps every week is that I would have to drive to Del Mar pretty much every day. Sometimes I would stay in Albany, but for the most part, I was driving back and forth, and it was an hour and 15-minute drive each way. So I was spending a lot of time sitting in a car and then sitting while I got my treatment. It's just a lot of sitting, waiting, and it's just depressing. You don't feel great. It's really time consuming and exhausting. And so it's like a little bit hard to care for yourself when you're constantly tired. So I think that part of why I didn't feel like better sooner is just that every day was really exhausting. And I probably wasn't eating as well as like when I'm home and just like able to cook every meal and make everything really fresh. So yeah, not having that has been huge this past week. But yeah, back to the timeline. It was really after like 8 weeks. I would say that if I wasn't an athlete, I would have said I feel totally fine because a lot of my symptoms had really normalized, but I was still trying to run a little bit and I could really feel it in my legs. So by the end, like up until my 12th week, the main things that I was experiencing were air hunger, although getting more mild every week, and this like extreme leg heaviness, which is just a product of the way that the Babesia affects your red blood cells. So the type of anemia, it's not a low iron anemia, but Babesia attacks your red blood cells. So the hemoglobin content is off and the size of your red blood cells is off. And so, yeah, your legs feel like junk. Running was really tough, but it definitely let me know that I still wasn't totally there. So I had about 4 weeks where things were pretty steady. And my doctor then wanted me to do 2 weeks on the taper before stopping. And so that's where we are. A week ago was my last IV trip. And now it's just this phase of trying to continue to apply pressure to the infections. So my labs also improved pretty dramatically. That was my Lyme and Bartonella labs. We haven't retested my Babesia recently, just because I was definitely still experiencing symptoms. The decision was made that it was time. And I felt like I could feel it in my body. Like my body was definitely sending signals that it was ready for the next phase because I was having a hard time like getting an IV every day. Like my veins were definitely getting tired. I was getting really tired of all the driving and sitting. My back was starting to ache from all of it. So I was really nervous about stopping, but also relieved that the time had come. And yeah, I still have a bunch of oral medication. So that's some antibiotics and some herbal medicine, and then just a ton of supplements. So I still have a lot going in to try and suppress everything and get rid of whatever we can. But yeah, at this point, like one week out, I definitely feel the best that I have felt in my leg heaviness has improved a ton. Like I can actually run and feel semi-normal pretty well. And I'll talk about that a little bit in a bit. But yeah, I think a lot of the questions I got were just around my treatment in general and like where it went and which medications I was on. So I'll caveat by saying that having talked to a lot of people going through similar situations, everyone's case is so different. So many people have different infections and co-infections, and everybody seems to respond to different medication protocols, like lengths and doses and supplements, totally different, even if they have the same infections. And given my own experience, it was definitely a bit of a learning process. We tried 3 different Babesia protocols before actually finding one that was working for me. Yeah, to start, I guess the real start goes back to last year because that's when I started treating everything, but I'll just 16 weeks. The place where I received my treatment is called Stram Center, and they have locations in New York and Vermont. Their location in New York is in Delmar, which is basically Albany. And I first went there in 2022 when at the time I had undiagnosed Rocky Mountain spotted fever. So I'm very familiar with the practice and had a provider there and everything. They're an integrative health center and they have every possible service to treat people as like whole people. So they have the physicians, and then there's like a nursing staff, which they administer all the IVs. There's a lab. They have a registered dietitian. They have acupuncturists, a mental health therapist. So it is like very full picture and full body, which is amazing. And I used so many of their services throughout my time, which I think really helped. So they will do a lot of testing when you come in with an issue. This is another question that I received is like, what kind of testing was done to determine which tick-borne illnesses I had and how to help approach treatment. They use other labs in addition to if you go to your primary care doctor, they'll do like an ELISA and Western blot. The Stram Center, they also use a lab called MDL, which does more sensitive testing for things like Lyme and Bartonella. And then also there's another company called IGenics, which has like the most sensitive testing for all of these things. So I have had a lot of MDL and IGenics labs done, and I'm not sciencey enough to really understand how they're different, but I just know that they are more sensitive. And the Stram Center takes your symptoms plus your lab results to try and determine whether or not you should be being treated and what type of treatment to use. So over the course of the past year, I had very clear positive tests for anaplasmosis, some strains of the Lyme bacteria, Babesia, and my Bartonella like flip-flopped between being positive and negative. The testing protocol and the treatment protocol, super individualized. My main IV treatment ended up being a combination of Rocephin and rifampin. So the Rocephin was used primarily for the Lyme, and that is an antibiotic that they use typically for neurological cases of Lyme. And then the rifampin is primarily for the Bartonella, although there's like a lot of crossover between these different antibiotics. So those were the 2 IVs I would get. And there was some like timing and spacing around the coartem every other week. So when I had the coartem, I couldn't do the rifampin, but I could still do Rocephin. And then in different phases, I also was taking azithromycin, which I mentioned before, and doxy orally. The approaches for patients varied widely, but if anyone has questions about what I treated things with, I'm more than happy to share. It was definitely really intense. The whole thing was totally out of pocket. So it was also really expensive. There were time periods, especially in the beginning, where it did not feel hopeful at all. I was really lucky that I had people telling me on a regular basis, like, it will get better, it will get better. And they were totally right, even though sometimes I was really hard to believe because you're just sick and everyone around you is sick and you just don't know. And even now, I just don't know. I don't know if everything I've done is going to hold. It's possible that I could just relapse, but the goal is, like, from here forward to just make sure that I'm taking really good care of myself, that my immune system is well supported. I followed the protocol to a T. I did not miss a single day. Actually, that's not true. I missed one day because I went to a different doctor's appointment in New York City. But aside from that one day over the 15 weeks, like, I did everything. I never skipped my supplements. I never skipped my oral medication. Like, I really stuck with it. I tried to eat as well as I could, lots of fruits and vegetables, a lot of protein, and I tried to sleep as well as I could too. I have noticed so many things change about, like, my body and who I am as a person, so physically and mentally. And one of the most wild things was realizing that I've probably had Bartonella for at least 10 years, which when I went into this, like, it wasn't even clear if I actually had Bartonella because the test kept flipping between positive and negative. But based on symptoms that have cleared, it's very obvious that I've had it and I've had it for a long time. So, not really sure if I got it from a tick bite or possibly from a cat scratch. I've had a cat my entire life. I did get bit by a tick in 2014 and I got super sick after that. I went to urgent care and they asked me, "Do you have a bullseye rash?" And I said no. And they sent me on my way. Maybe it was that. Who really knows? I definitely think something was. The other kind of, like, realization is that all of this was potentially dormant, at least like the Lyme and the Bartonella. And then I got COVID last year after one of my sky races. And it really wasn't until after I got everything, like, completely haywire. I was definitely experiencing some of the Bartonella symptoms prior to getting COVID, but they were, like, pretty low that didn't make me feel terrible. It was more like swollen lymph nodes and then this, like, feeling of wetness, like this, like, vascular feeling of wetness on my legs. Very hard to imagine, no one but believe me. Yeah, wild. And just, like, a lot of learning for me about the immune system and, like, how much the immune system can handle and what tips things over the edge. So I'm being super careful, trying really hard to get sick. Everyone has COVID right now. So I'm wearing a mask. I'm not doing things indoors with people, at least until, like, back to school germs calm down a little bit. But I'm really lucky to be able to do that, and really lucky to be in a position where I can try to protect my immune system as much as possible right now. So I ended those 14 weeks ready to move on, physically starting to feel better, and mentally feeling like a completely different person. More in the sense that, like, I had so much mental energy and so much more creativity. It's really exciting and overwhelming because I don't have to take a nap every day, and I wake up and I'm, like, excited to do things, and I'm excited to create. And yeah, I've been working on a bunch of projects mostly related to running and coaching and doing clinics, and it's really, like, lighting a fire in my soul. Last week alone, like, I did a group run for some women that I work with one-on-one, for trail running. And then that afternoon, I went and I led a coaching clinic for the Albany Soccer Club, which was really cool. I got to teach a bunch of high school and middle schoolers about running. They were a lot less enthused than the adults that were present. Maybe in 10 years, they'll look back on that moment and think, oh, yeah, that lady told us running was cool. But yeah, it's pretty wild, like how different you can feel. So for anyone that's out there that is like in the thick of it, whether it's tick-borne stuff or another illness, like I didn't believe people when they told me that it gets better, but it can definitely get better. It just might be a really long and difficult process. But especially if you're an athlete, I think some ways it makes it harder because you can't do the thing you love, but you're also like so strong and you know that you can do really hard things. So you just have to grit it out and really advocate for yourself. But it does get better. And hopefully I'm like living proof of that. And hopefully this is a reminder for myself in the event that things take a turn and are less positive, that I'm having this moment where I overcame a lot and I feel better than I have in a long time. And I have a lot of hope that I can feel even better than I did when I was at my best. Because if you have Bartonella, you're probably actually at your best. So that brings me to the next thing, which is running, which has been like the hardest thing to deal with, is dropping off completely as a competitive athlete, DNFing first race ever this spring, to not making it to any start lines this year. And that includes Escarpment, my favorite race in July. And then yesterday was another DNS, which means did not start, for Cat's Tail, another Catskill race that I have been wanting to get back to and do for so long. But the good news is that I'm finally starting to feel better with running. The first 3 weeks of my IV treatment, I could not run. I could barely walk. I did it, and I complained about it every day, which I feel guilty about because I should have been really thankful that I was at least able to walk. But much credit to my coach, Stephanie Howe, because she really encouraged me to just go for a walk, even though it's not running and it feels like it's so lame. But just, if you can walk, you'll feel better. And that was always true. I always felt better. And even just like doing 2 weeks, 3 weeks of walking, obviously meant that I lost less fitness than if I was sitting inside doing absolutely nothing. Shirley kept me going during that phase and then kept me on track once I started easing back into running. We've been doing a combination of running and cycling. The problem is that I live in a place where there are so many hills. I'm going up one right now. And going uphill is the hardest part of running or cycling, just because if you've ever had anemia, going uphill, that is just feels really terrible when your oxygen transport is subpar. So I would say that for 10 weeks, running like 99% of the time just felt awful. I didn't look forward to it most days. I more was just doing it because I knew that if I did it, then now, when I do feel better, I would be in so much of a better place to start ramping up and would not feel super out of shape. And it's really true, like slogging through runs, which I was doing for 10 weeks. I was pretty consistent with 4 to 5 hours of running per week. It was really slow running if I was on trail, which I really didn't do trails up until a couple weeks ago. It had a lot of hiking, But I was out there moving, going through the motion, and then that was coupled with usually 2 to 3 hours of cycling each week. So I was still getting in 6 to 7 hours of exercise. And I was doing yoga when I could, some PT. So I know that probably actually sounds like a lot, but when you're used to training like 10 to 15 hours a week, running, and then doing 2 to 3 strength workouts on top of that, plus PT, and maybe cycling a few times, like this is just so little. And for none of it to feel good is like really hard because you wonder, will it ever feel good again? I am happy to report that over the past few weeks, my leg heaviness has gone down so much that running is actually fun again. And because I've actually been moving my body, I feel like I'm just getting free fitness because it wasn't a lack of movement that was slowing me down and making me feel sluggish. It was literally my red blood cells. So now that they're coming around, like running feels really good again. Definitely not in peak fitness, but we started easing back in speed. I call it speed because I literally started out with 5 by 20-second strides and then built up to 30-second strides and then did 2 workouts of 6 by 1 minute, which the first 6 by 1 minute that I did, I ran at like my old 50K race pace and felt like I was running a 1-mile race each time. It burned so bad. But even by the second one, just a few days later, I felt like I'd already gotten some adaptation, felt so much smoother, like my neuromuscular recruitment was coming back around. And yeah, last week I did my first track workout. I can't even begin to describe like how incredible the feeling was to be on the SUNY Albany track with the Albany Running Exchange doing a workout. And I felt so good. I honestly just wanted to stand in the center of the field and scream at the top of my lungs with joy. But I kept it inside and just told the people around me that I was so happy and so excited. At this point, just being really patient because I know that I can't overdo it. So being patient, even though I feel better, definitely hard. As you can see, the weather is pretty dang nice right now. We're having a great fall, but I know that it'll pay off in the long run. I'm trying to be super smart, leaning on my coach and the people around me, continuing to take really good care of myself, but definitely starting to dream a little bit and think about maybe getting back into some shorter distance races early next year, hopefully having a pretty solid winter, maybe building up my volume just a little bit. But yeah, it's a nice feeling. And I'm just really trying to embrace the fact that I do feel good after not feeling good for so long, but also trying to hold it a little bit loosely, knowing that so much can be temporary. I don't want to acknowledge the possibility that things could go backwards, but that is a reality. Unfortunately, one that so many people face. I'm gonna ride the highs and hopefully not going to sink too much if there are lows. Thanks for listening. Thanks to everyone for the support. I am hoping that this wraps up the I'm ill phase and is the start of a new chapter, which is I'm coming back and I want to be on the trails again. I've been dabbling a little bit, mostly with trails that I know are pretty grass free. I have my systems in place. I treat everything with permatrain. I put on bug spray. I do tick checks. I do everything that I possibly can to make myself feel safe. And I know it's not 100% guarantee, but being on trails, there is nothing that I love more. And I don't want that to be taken away from me. Seriously, look how beautiful it is here. This is where I live. It's the best. Until next time.